Hello everyone, and welcome. I'm glad you're here today. We're about to dive into an exciting presentation, starting with Mega Goal 1.2. The focus of this session is on Unit 8, titled Wishful Thinking, with an emphasis on form, meaning, and function. Over the next few slides, we'll explore how language works in these areas, helping us understand the deeper aspects of communication. So let's get started and enjoy the journey through this fascinating topic. Today, we're going to focus on the grammatical rules necessary to do the exercises in this lesson. First, we'll look at how to apply these rules between countable and uncountable nouns, which is crucial for correct sentence structure. Next, we'll learn how to differentiate expressions of quantity, such as some, any, and no, so you can use them appropriately in different contexts. Then, we'll explore how to use words connected with money, shopping habits, and prices, which will help you talk about economic activities more confidently. Throughout this slide, keep in mind that mastering these points will help you communicate more clearly and accurately in real-life situations. So, let's dive into each of these key areas to strengthen your understanding and skills. Let's look at some examples to understand this better. When I say 3 pens, I am talking about a specific number of pens. Similarly, 2 pens shows a smaller quantity, and 1 pen emphasizes just a single item. These examples highlight an important point. Nouns that we count, like pens, are called countable nouns. Countable nouns are things we can easily number or count. You can have 1, 2, 3, or more of these items. Now, the key question is, what's the difference between these and other nouns? That's what we'll explore next, non-count nouns, which are nouns that we cannot count individually. Understanding the difference between count and non-count nouns is essential because it affects how we use them with numbers, articles, and quantifiers in English. So, as we move forward, keep in mind that count nouns are things like pens, books, or chairs, things you can count one by one. Let's take a closer look at some common examples like sugar, water, and milk. These are all nouns that we often talk about, but they are uncountable. That means you can't really say sugars or waters when you're referring to these. Instead, we think of them as a whole or in general. This brings us to an important concept. Some nouns are countable, meaning you can count them, like apples or books. Others are uncountable, like these examples here, which are what we call non-count nouns. Recognizing whether a noun is count or non-count helps us use the right words and articles, and it's a key part of mastering English grammar. Understanding the difference between count and non-count nouns is essential because it influences how we talk about things, how we use quantities, and even how we write sentences. It's a fundamental concept that supports clear, accurate communication. Now let's take a look at some common nouns and see how we can classify them into 2 categories, countable and uncountable. On this slide, you'll see a list of words like juice, meat, oil, salt, butter, cheese, jackets, cats, pencils, girls, and eggs. The key point here is that some nouns can be counted individually, like jackets, cats, pencils, girls, and eggs. These are what we call countable nouns because you can say 1 jacket, 2 jackets, and so on. On the other hand, there are uncountable nouns such as juice, meat, oil, salt, butter, and cheese. These refer to substances or concepts that we don't usually count one by one. Instead, we measure or refer to them in terms of quantity or amount, like a glass of juice or a piece of cheese. A quick tip to remember is that most nouns ending in S are often countable, but not always. And uncountable nouns tend to refer to things we experience in bulk or as a whole. In the context of our overall theme, understanding whether a noun is countable or uncountable helps us decide how to use words like n, or some, and whether to use plural forms. So mastering this classification is essential for clear and correct communication. All right, let's take a closer look at how we determine whether a noun is countable or uncountable. On this slide, you'll notice a mix of both types. When a noun is uncountable, it generally refers to things that we think of as a whole or mass, like information, water, or furniture. These are things we don't usually count individually. Conversely, countable nouns are items we can count one by one, like books, chairs, or apples. Understanding whether a noun is countable or uncountable is crucial because it affects how we use articles, quantifiers, and plural forms. For example, with uncountable nouns, we often say some water or much information, whereas with countable nouns, we say a book or several chairs. On this slide, you see the pattern. Some words are uncountable, some are countable. Recognizing this helps us communicate more accurately and grammatically correct. Remember, this distinction ties back to the overall theme of mastering proper noun usage in English, whether for writing or speaking. Let's take a look at this slide, which references the workbook on page 309. As you can see, there are several letters here, N and C, repeated in a pattern. These letters stand for different concepts or categories we've been discussing. The N typically represents insert what N stands for, e.g., needs or notes, while the C might stand for insert what C stands for, e.g., criteria or conditions. The repetition here isn't just random. It highlights how these elements interact or how they are prioritized within our framework. By examining this pattern, we can better understand the relationship between these components and how they influence our overall strategy or analysis. It's crucial to recognize that the balance between these elements can impact our decision-making process. So, when we refer back to this in the context of the entire presentation, remember that these repeated patterns symbolize the ongoing interplay between these key factors, which ultimately helps us build a comprehensive approach to the topic at hand. Today, I want to talk about some common quantifiers that we often encounter in language and communication. First, we have no, which clearly indicates the absence of something. It's a definitive way to say that there isn't any of what we're discussing. Next, we have any, which is a bit more flexible. It can be used in questions or negative sentences to refer to an unspecified amount or number. Moving on, we have some, which usually suggests an indefinite but positive quantity. It's often used when we're talking about a certain amount, but not a specific number. Understanding these quantifiers is crucial because they help us convey the right amount or presence of something accurately. They might seem simple, but choosing the right one can make a big difference in how our message is received. These words are essential tools in both everyday conversation and more formal communication. They connect to our overall theme of effective language use, showing how small words can significantly impact clarity and meaning. All right, let's look at how we use some in affirmative sentences. For example, when we say there are some apples on the table, we're indicating that there is an unspecified quantity of apples, and this is a countable noun. On the other hand, when I say there is some water in the glass, we're talking about an uncountable noun, water in this case. So, the key point here is that some is used in positive sentences to refer to an unspecified amount or number of something. It helps us talk about things that exist or are present without specifying exactly how many or how much. This usage of some is very common in everyday conversation, especially when we're describing things around us. Remember, whether the noun is countable or uncountable, some can be used in affirmative sentences to express presence or existence. So, keep this in mind, and you'll be able to use some confidently in your sentences. Now, let's talk about how we use some when we want to ask for or offer something politely. When you're making a polite request or offering, using some helps make it sound more courteous and friendly. For example, if you want to ask someone if they want a drink, you could say, "Would you like some water?" Or, "Can I have some milk, please?" The word some is very useful in these situations because it adds a polite tone and makes the request or offer feel more gentle. So, to sum up, we use some in these kinds of sentences to make our requests or offers sound polite and considerate. It's a simple but important way to communicate kindly in English. Remember, whenever you're offering or asking in a friendly way, some is your go-to word. Today, we're going to look at how any is used in negative sentences and questions. So, whenever you're forming a question or a negative sentence, any often comes into play. For example, in a question like, "Are there any students in the school?" Here, any is used to ask about the presence of students. It's important to note that this is a countable noun, meaning we can count the students. Similarly, when asking about uncountable nouns, you might say, "Is there any milk in the fridge?" In this case, milk is uncountable, but any still works perfectly. Now, when do we actually use any? We mainly use any in questions and negative sentences. It's generally used to refer to some in questions, especially when we're not sure if something exists. This brings us to the comparison of some and any. Some is usually used in positive sentences, while any is more common in negatives and questions. So remember, whenever you're asking a question or making a negative statement, any is your go-to word to refer to indefinite quantities or quantities that might not exist. Let's take a closer look at the note on this slide. When we say there's no milk in the glass, it's the same as saying there isn't any milk. This is where the word no comes into play. In affirmative sentences, no is used to express a negative meaning, which is essentially the same as saying not any. For example, if I say, "I have no friends," it means I don't have any friends at all. Now, it's important to remember that no can be used with both countable and uncountable nouns. For countable nouns, like friends, it means 0 of those items. For uncountable nouns, like milk, it also indicates that there is none. So when we say, "There is no milk," we're clearly stating that the milk is completely absent. So to sum up, no is a very useful word when we want to express the absence of something, especially in negative statements. It helps us communicate clearly that something does not exist or is not present. And this use of no ties directly into the overall theme of understanding how to express negation effectively in English. So on this slide, we're looking at a simple sentence. There are some apples on the table. Now, let's think about how we can improve or correct this sentence. First, notice that the original sentence uses the word some to describe the apples. That's actually the correct choice here because some is used with plural nouns when we're talking about an unspecified quantity. Next, the slide suggests that we should omit the word any and replace some with any in the sentence. But here's the key point. Any is typically used in questions or negative sentences, not in positive statements like this one. So if we replace some with any here, the sentence becomes, "There are any apples on the table," which actually sounds odd and is grammatically incorrect for a positive statement. The slide then asks us to find the fib or the mistake in this scenario. The fib here is that "there are any apples on the table" is incorrect in this context. It's a common mistake to think any can be used in positive statements, but it generally isn't. Understanding the correct usage of some and any is essential, especially as we work to improve our communication skills in English. It ties back to our overall theme of grasping subtle language nuances to communicate more clearly and accurately. All right, let's take a look at this example. We start with the sentence, "There isn't any milk in the fridge." Now notice that in English, when we use a negative sentence with "there isn't," we typically use any instead of some. So, if we want to omit the word any, the correct version would be, "There isn't some milk in the fridge." But this sounds a bit odd, right? Because some in negative sentences is usually incorrect or at least unusual. The main point here is about choosing the right word, either some or any, depending on the context. When we're making negative sentences, any is generally the correct choice. So when you see a sentence like this, you should recognize that any is the appropriate word to use. This ties into the overall theme of our presentation, which is about understanding how to properly use these quantifiers in different sentence structures. It's a small detail, but it can really change the meaning or correctness of a sentence. And that's why, in this case, the correct version is, "There isn't any milk in the fridge," not "there isn't some milk." It's a simple but important rule to keep in mind as you improve your English skills. All right, let's clarify this common confusion. The word money is actually an uncountable noun. That means we don't say monies or a money. Instead, we treat it as a whole, an uncountable concept. So when we're writing or speaking, we need to omit the word countable and focus on uncountable. Now here's a little twist. Sometimes people try to say that money is countable, but it's a common mistake. And that's what we call the find the fib part. The fib is the idea that money is countable. It's not. It's uncountable, and understanding this helps us use it correctly in sentences. So remember, whenever you're talking about money in general, whether it's cash, funds, or currency, you should treat it as uncountable. This is a key point because it influences how we use other words with money, like some money or a lot of money, rather than monies. Connecting this to our overall theme, mastering the correct use of uncountable nouns like money is essential for clear, accurate communication. It helps us avoid common mistakes and sound more professional in our language. Let's take a look at the workbook on page 309. Here, you'll notice the use of words like any, a some, and some again. These words are fundamental because they help us understand how to refer to quantities or objects in a nonspecific way. For example, any is often used in questions or negative statements, while a and an are used when we're talking about a single, unspecified item. Some typically refers to an unspecified amount or number, often in positive statements or offers. Recognizing these words helps us communicate more clearly and precisely, especially when we're discussing quantities or making general statements. Connecting this to our overall theme, understanding these small words enhances our ability to express and interpret meaning accurately in both written and spoken language. Let's talk about some common ways people make purchases. You might use a credit card, which is very convenient and widely accepted. Cash is still an option for many, especially for smaller amounts. When paying in SAR or Saudi Riyal, it's important to be aware of the local currency. Sometimes, you might find that the item is much cheaper than expected, which is always a nice surprise. For example, wool products can vary in price, and discounts often make them more affordable. If you're shopping for something small, like accessories or souvenirs, it can help to look carefully at the size. Sometimes small items are perfect for gifts or personal use. And if you're looking for help, don't hesitate to ask. People are generally willing to assist. When you're looking for something specific, taking your time and looking thoroughly can make a big difference. Overall, understanding these key points can help you shop smarter and make the most of your purchases. All right, for your homework, please turn to Workbook page 309. There, you'll find exercise M through O. These exercises are designed to reinforce the key concepts we've covered today. Take your time to work through each one carefully and try to connect what you're doing here back to the main ideas we've discussed. Remember, the goal is to deepen your understanding and apply these concepts practically. Once you've completed the exercises, you'll have a stronger grasp of the material and be better prepared for what's next. Thanks for your attention, and I look forward to seeing your progress.